children could do, the atmospheric readings made no sense. Storm Jenkins squinted at her weather station's display, watching impossibly contradictory data scroll across multiple screens. Barometric pressure was simultaneously rising and falling. In different sectors of the colony, wind patterns showed circular motion in 12 different directions. And the electromagnetic readings, impossible, she muttered. Recalibrating her instruments for the third time in an hour, the colony of New Aberdeen on Kepler 442c was humanity's most remote outpost, a terraforming project on a world that should have been uninhabitable. The planet's dual suns created weather patterns so violent that the Galactic Council had declared it a death world after losing 3 separate survey teams. Yet somehow, the 5,000 human colonists had not only survived here for 2 years, they were thriving. Storm's weather station sat on the highest tower of the main settlement, giving her a panoramic view of the amber grasslands that stretched to the Crimson Mountains. The adapted earth crops grew in neat rows between the prefabricated buildings, their genetic modifications allowing them to process the planet's unique atmosphere. Children played in the streets below, their laughter carrying on winds that would have torn apart most alien respiratory systems. A proximity alarm chimed. Storm looked up from her instruments to see a sleek Seltharian diplomatic vessel descending through the planet's turbulent upper atmosphere. The ship's elegant curves and silver hull marked it as belonging to the Galactic Council's most influential species beings, who controlled interstellar trade and colonization rights across 3 spiral arms. Huh, Storm said, watching the ship struggle against wind shears that would have been routine for human pilots. Wonder what brings the space elves to our little slice of hell, her communicator crackled. Storm, we need you in the council chamber. Now, the voice belonged to Director Sarah Chun, the colony's administrator. Storm grabbed her portable weather kit and headed for the lift. As the elevator descended, she caught glimpses through the tower's windows of the Zeltharian ship finally touching. Down on the landing pad, its hull scarred by atmospheric friction, 2 figures in environmental suits emerged, moving carefully in the planet's crushing 3G gravity. The council chamber was already crowded when Storm arrived. Director Chun stood at the head of the long table, her usually calm demeanor showing stress fractures. Around the table sat the colony's department heads, Marcus Webb from engineering, Dr. Elena Vasquez from medical, and Captain Rex Sullivan from security. 2 Zeltharians in sleek environmental suits flanked the far end of the table, their tall, graceful forms looking uncomfortable in the heavy gravity. Storm, meet Counselor Lythe Silverwind and Trade Inspector Vex Starweaver, Chun said. They're here on official business. The taller Zeltharian, Silverwind, activated a translation device that projected her words in perfect English. Ms. Jenkins, your reputation precedes you. We understand you are responsible for the unusual weather predictions that have kept this colony operational. Storm raised an eyebrow. I read the weather. The planet does the rest. Indeed, which brings us to why we're here. Silverwind gestured to a holographic display that materialized above the table. It showed Kepler 442c from orbit, with the human colony as a small green dot on one continent. The Galactic Council has received concerning reports about this world. Reports that suggest immediate evacuation is necessary. Evacuation? Captain. Sullivan leaned forward. We've been here 2 years without major incident. Inspector Starweaver spoke for the first time, his voice carrying the musical quality typical of his species. 3 days ago, our long-range sensors detected a massive atmospheric disturbance forming in this system, a hyperstorm of unprecedented magnitude created by the interaction between your 2 suns and a passing dark matter field. The hologram shifted to show swirling energy patterns around the dual suns. This storm will make planetfall in approximately 96 hours. Wind speeds will exceed 800 kilometers per hour. Electromagnetic interference will disable all technology. Surface temperatures will fluctuate between absolute 0 and plasma levels. Director Chun's face had gone pale. How long will it last? Our models suggest 6 to 8 standard months, Silverwind replied. No known species has ever survived a hyperstorm of this magnitude. The Council has dispatched an evacuation fleet, but they cannot arrive for 72 hours. Given the storm's projected path and intensity, evacuation must begin immediately. Storm had been quietly studying the data on her portable display. Now she looked up, frowning. Your models are wrong. The chamber fell silent. Starweaver's mandibles clicked in what Storm recognized as Altharian irritation. I beg your pardon? Your Storm models. They're based on standard atmospheric physics, right? Gas giant interactions, solar wind patterns, that sort of thing. Storm stood and walked to the holographic display, her fingers dancing over her handheld unit. But Kepler 442c isn't a standard world. The terraforming process created unique atmospheric layers that your sensors can't properly read from orbit. She uploaded her data to the display. The hologram shifted, showing new atmospheric readings. See these pressure differentials and these electromagnetic pockets? The planet's weather system is more complex than your models account for. This isn't going to be a hyperstorm. Then what is it? Chun asked. Storm studied the readings for another moment, her mind racing through atmospheric calculations. Her specialty wasn't just reading weather, it was understanding the impossible weather. Patterns that made death worlds, like Kepler 442c, habitable for humans. She'd spent her career predicting the unpredictable, finding safe passages through atmospheric chaos that would destroy conventional spacecraft. It's going to be something I've never seen before, she admitted. Your sensors are picking up legitimate readings, but they're not seeing the whole picture. The storm is real, but double quotes. She paused, double-checking her calculations. But it's not going to be a killer storm. It's going to be something else entirely. Counselor Silverwind's environmental suit whirred as she adjusted its settings. Ms. Jenkins, with respect, our atmospheric models have been refined over thousands of years across hundreds of worlds. The Zaltharian scientific establishment has never tried to model weather on a world where humans have been terraforming for 2 years. Storm interrupted. You know what makes humans good at living on death worlds? We don't just survive the weather, we change it, and it changes us back. She manipulated the hologram again, highlighting specific atmospheric layers. Look at these trace chemical signatures. Oxygen levels that shift with human agricultural patterns. Electromagnetic fields that align with our power grid frequencies. This planet isn't just being terraformed by our technology, it's actively adapting to human presence. Dr. Vasquez nodded slowly. The children born here do show unusual adaptations. Enhanced lung capacity, better balance in heavy gravity, improved electromagnetic sensitivity, ... Exactly. And those adaptations go both ways. The planet's weather systems are learning to work with human patterns instead of against them. Storm turned to face the Zaltharians. Your hyperstorm isn't going to destroy the colony, it's going to test it. And if I'm right, we'll come through it stronger than before. Inspector Starweaver's translation device conveyed deep skepticism. You're suggesting that humans have somehow ... tamed ... a death world's climate in 2 years? I'm suggesting that humans don't tame anything. We adapt, and we make things adapt to us. It's not taming, it's partnership. Storm looked around the room. But to make this work, everyone needs to stay. The storm is going to require all of us working together to ride it out. Silverwind's suit flickered as she accessed remote data. Ms. Jenkins, the evacuation fleet has already been dispatched. The Council's decision is final. This colony will be evacuated for the safety of all inhabitants. Then you'll be evacuating corpses, Storm said flatly. Because if you pull people out of the atmospheric pattern we've established here, the planet's weather system will destabilize completely. The next storm, the one that comes after your hyperstorm, will be the real killer. It'll turn this entire continent into a wasteland. The room erupted in arguments. Director Chun tried to maintain order, while Captain Sullivan demanded to know why they were just hearing about this now. The Zaltharians conferred in their own language, their musical tones taking on sharp, discordant notes. Storm walked to the window and looked out at the children playing in the streets below. Above them, the sky was already beginning to change. Color as high-altitude winds shifted in response to the approaching solar disturbance. Her instruments showed pressure readings that would have made seasoned meteorologists resign in confusion. But Storm had spent her entire career reading impossible weather. She'd started as a teenager in the Australian outback, predicting dust storms that could bury entire towns. She'd moved on to Mars, where she'd been the first human to successfully forecast dust devil patterns in the thin atmosphere. Then, the asteroid belt, where she'd helped mining crews navigate plasma storms around Jupiter's magnetosphere. Every world taught her something new about the relationship between humans and hostile environments. And every world had reinforced the same truth. Humans survived not by conquering their environment, but by becoming part of it. Director Chun, she said, turning from the window. I need to make a proposal. The argument stopped. Chun nodded. Go ahead. Give me 24 hours to prove my theory. Let me show you that we can not only survive this storm, but that we need to survive it. The children especially. They're the key to everything I'm talking about. Counselor Silverwind's translator conveyed polite but firm disagreement. Ms. Jenkins, the council cannot risk 5,000 human lives on an unproven theory. The evacuation fleet arrives in 72 hours. All colonists must be ready for immediate departure. What if I could guarantee the safety of the children? Storm asked. What if I could show you that they're not just adapted to this world, they're essential to its stability? That's impossible, Inspector Starweaver said. No species has ever achieved true atmospheric symbiosis in such a short time frame. Storm smiled grimly. No species has ever been human. She activated her communicator and patched into the colony's general frequency. This is Storm Jenkins at Weather Central. I need all families with children born on Kepler 442c to report to the main plaza immediately. Bring your kids, bring a change of clothes, and bring whatever food you can carry. We're going to have a camping trip. Storm, what are you doing? Chun demanded. I'm going to show our guests what human weather prediction really looks like. And if I'm wrong, she shrugged. Well, the evacuation fleet will still arrive in 72 hours. Within an hour, nearly 300 colonists had gathered in the main plaza. The families with planet-born children formed a loose circle around Storm's hastily assembled weather station, while the Zeltharian visitors observed from the safety of the council building's covered walkway. Storm had never seen so many of the colony's children in one place. 87 kids ranging in age from newborn to 2 years old, all showing the subtle adaptations that Dr. Vasquez had documented. Their eyes were slightly larger than Earth normal, better adapted to the planet's amber-filtered sunlight. Their inner ears showed enhanced balance organs for the heavy gravity. And most notably, their skin had a faint luminescent quality that seemed to respond to electromagnetic changes in the atmosphere. All right, everyone, Storm called out, adjusting her portable instruments. I know this seems crazy, but I need everyone to trust me for the next few hours. We're going to be monitoring these kids while the atmospheric pressure changes. And I think we're going to see something remarkable. Sarah Martinez, holding her 18-month-old daughter Lucia, stepped forward. Storm, what exactly are we looking for? Bioatmospheric resonance, Storm replied, setting up electromagnetic sensors around the plaza. If I'm right, these children aren't just adapted to Kepler 442c's weather patterns, they're actually connected to them. Their nervous systems have developed to read and respond to atmospheric changes in ways that our instruments can't detect. Marcus. Webb looked skeptical. You're saying the kids can predict weather? I'm saying they are the weather in a sense. Or at least, they're part of the same system. Storm activated her scanning equipment and immediately saw what she'd hoped for. The children's bioelectric fields were pulsing in rhythm with the planet's electromagnetic fluctuations. Look at this. She projected her readings onto a portable holographic display. The children's neural activity showed wave patterns that matched the atmospheric disturbances her weather station had been detecting. As the approaching storm system grew stronger, the patterns grew more complex and coordinated. 2-year-old Michael Chun, director. Chun's nephew todded over to Storm's weather station and placed his small hand on one of the sensors. Immediately, the electromagnetic readings shifted, showing clearer patterns and more stable measurements. Fascinating, Dr. Vasquez murmured, taking her own readings with a medical scanner. The children's nervous systems are actively interpreting and processing atmospheric data. It's like they're living barometers. From the walkway, Inspector Starweaver's voice carried a note of scientific curiosity. If this is genuine bioatmospheric adaptation, it would be unprecedented in galactic records. Storm nodded, watching as more children gravitated toward her instruments. Each one that made contact improved the clarity of her readings. That's because no other species has ever tried to make long-term colonies on death worlds. Most species find a nice, stable planet with predictable weather and settle there. Humans, we look at the most hostile world in the system and say, I bet we could make that work. The sky above them was beginning to show the first signs of the approaching disturbance. High-altitude clouds moved in complex spirals, and the air pressure was dropping steadily. Storm's conventional instruments showed chaotic readings, but the bio-integrated sensors, the ones responding to the children's neural patterns, showed something entirely different. The storm isn't random, she announced, studying the new data. It's following patterns that these kids can read instinctively. She looked up at the gathered families. I need everyone to spread out across the plaza. Parents, hold your children and watch their reactions. If they get restless or point in a particular direction, call out. We're going to use them as an early warning system. For the next 2 hours, Storm conducted the strangest weather observation session of her career. The planet-born children served as living sensors, their behavioral changes providing data that no mechanical instrument could match. When air pressure dropped in the eastern sectors, the children facing that direction would become agitated. When electromagnetic fields shifted in the upper atmosphere, the babies would all turn their heads in unison toward the source. Most remarkably, when Storm asked the verbal children to point toward the storm, they all pointed in the same direction, but not toward the conventional atmospheric disturbance her instruments were tracking. They were pointing toward something else entirely. They're reading a different storm, Storm realized, adjusting her equipment to scan in the direction the children indicated. The hyperstorm your sensors detected, that's just the surface phenomenon. There's something deeper happening. Her deep atmosphere scanners revealed what the children had been sensing. A massive pressure system forming in the planet's lower atmospheric layers, driven by geothermal activity interacting with the solar disturbance. The hyperstorm would indeed bring powerful winds and electromagnetic interference to the surface. But underneath it, a stable high-pressure system was forming that would actually protect the colony from the worst effects. It's like a planetary umbrella, Storm explained to the growing crowd of observers. A surface storm will be violent, but it's creating a protective layer underneath. The children can sense both systems because their nervous systems are tuned to the planet's complete atmospheric profile, not just surface conditions. Counselor Silverwind approached the weather station, her environmental suit whirring as it adjusted to the changing atmospheric pressure. This is highly irregular. Our models predicted total atmospheric chaos. Your models predicted what would happen to a normal world, Storm corrected. This isn't a normal world anymore. 2 years of human habitation has created feedback loops between our technology, our biology, and the planet's natural systems. The storm isn't trying to destroy us. It's trying to incorporate us. As if to demonstrate her point, 3-year-old James Parker broke away from his parents and ran to the Huron's center of the plaza. He stood with his arms outstretched, his face turned toward the darkening sky, and began to giggle. The sound was infectious. Within moments, all 87 children were laughing, their voices creating a harmony that seemed to resonate with the atmospheric disturbance overhead. Storm's instruments showed the electromagnetic chaos organizing itself into more stable patterns as the children responded to it. They're not just reading the weather, Dr. Vasquez said in amazement. They're communicating with it. Storm felt a chill of recognition. This was what she'd been sensing in her weather data for months. The planet wasn't just being terraformed by human technology. It was actively learning to work with human biology. The children born here weren't just adapted to the local environment. They were the first generation of a new kind of human, one capable of true atmospheric symbiosis. Inspector Starweaver, she called out, I need you to see this data. The Zeltharian approached cautiously, his suit's sensors extended. Storm showed him the comparative readings. The chaotic storm system detected by orbital sensors versus the organized, manageable weather pattern revealed by bioatmospheric integration. The evacuation fleet is detecting the wrong storm, Storm explained. They're seeing the surface chaos, but missing the stable system underneath. If you evacuate the colony now, you'll break the bioatmospheric feedback loop that's keeping the deep storm stable. The next weather system, the one that hits after your evacuation fleet leaves, will be the real killer. Starweaver studied the data for several minutes, his mandibles clicking in thought. Finally, he activated his communicator and began speaking in rapid Zeltharian to someone off-world. Director Chun, how certain are you about this? Storm looked around the plaza at the children, all of whom were now playing happily, despite the approaching storm that had terrified galactic scientists. Certain enough to bet my life on it, and theirs. The first drops of rain began to fall, but it wasn't normal rain. The droplets glowed faintly with bioluminescent particles, and where they touched the children's skin, soft patterns of light appeared and faded. The kids laughed and reached for more of the glowing drops. The planet is incorporating Earth biologics into its weather systems, Storm realized. That's why our readings seemed impossible. We weren't just measuring weather, we were measuring the birth of a new kind of ecosystem. Inspector Starweaver finished his conversation and approached the group. I have spoken with the Galactic Council. They are skeptical, but willing to delay the evacuation for 24 hours pending further observations. 24 hours, Storm repeated. The main storm hits in 18 hours. If we're going to prove this works, we need to ride it out completely. Counselor Silverwind's translator conveyed deep concern. Ms. Jenkins, if you are wrong, 5,000 humans will die, including these children who have never known any world but this one. Storm looked up at the sky, where the first lightning was beginning to flicker between the clouds. But it wasn't normal lightning either. The electrical discharges moved in, slow, spiral patterns, more like aurora than storm activity. If I'm wrong, we die, she agreed. But if you evacuate us, and I'm right, the planet dies. And any chance of humans learning to live on Deathworlds dies with it. This isn't just about one colony. It's about proving that humans can adapt to any environment, given time and trust. She knelt down and picked up little Lucia Martinez, who had been tugging on her pant leg. The child's eyes were glowing faintly with the same bioluminescence as the rain, and she was pointing steadily toward the northeast, directly at the heart of the approaching storm. Besides, Storm added, I don't think the choice is really ours anymore. The kids have already decided. They're not afraid of this storm. They're excited about it. As if summoned by her words, a low harmonic sound began to emanate from the approaching weather system. It wasn't thunder, it was something more like music. A deep resonance that seemed to vibrate through the ground itself. The children responded by humming along, their voices creating a harmony that complemented the planetary song. Storm smiled grimly. 24 hours, Inspector, but I have a feeling we're going to need every minute of it. The storm arrived 12 hours early. Storm woke to the sound of her weather station's emergency alarms screaming across the colony. Outside her window, the sky was a roiling mass of clouds that pulsed with internal lightning, casting everything in alternating shadows of amber and electric blue. The wind wasn't howling, it was singing, a harmonic progression that seemed to resonate through the very foundations of the buildings. Her communicator crackled with Director Chun's voice. Storm, we need you in the emergency shelter. Now, on my way, Storm replied, grabbing her portable weather kit. But as she headed for the door, she stopped. Through her window, she could see families hurrying through the streets toward the reinforced shelters. All except the families with planet-born children. Those families were moving in the opposite direction, toward the main plaza. Storm changed course and headed for the plaza instead. What she found there defied every principle of emergency preparedness she'd ever learned. Nearly 300 colonists were setting up what looked like an outdoor festival, complete with tents, cooking stations, and play areas for the children. The Zeltharian visitors stood under a hastily erected canopy, their environmental suits flashing with alert indicators. Storm, Sarah Martinez called out, waving her over. The kids won't go to the shelters. Every time we try to take them inside, they get agitated and point back toward the plaza. They know something we don't, added Marcus Webb, who was assembling a weather monitoring station near the center of the plaza. My daughter Emma hasn't stopped humming since the storm reached the outer atmosphere. It's like she's tuning into something. Storm activated her portable sensors and immediately understood why the children were drawn to the plaza. The electromagnetic field readings here were completely different from the rest of the colony. Instead of chaotic interference, the plaza showed organized wave patterns that matched the bioelectric signatures of the planet-born children. They're not just attracted to this spot, Storm realized. They're creating it. They're nervous. Systems are actually modifying the local electromagnetic environment. Counselor Silverwind approached, her translator device struggling with the atmospheric interference. Ms. Jenkins, our orbital sensors show the storm reaching critical intensity. Surface winds will exceed 500 kilometers per hour within the next 2 hours. Storm looked up at the sky, where the clouds were now moving in complex spiral patterns that reminded her of DNA helixes. Your sensors are still measuring the wrong phenomenon. Look. She activated her bioatmospheric scanner, the one that incorporated readings from the children's neural patterns. The display showed not a chaotic storm, but an organized system with clearly defined pressure zones and predictable wind patterns. Children aren't just reading the weather, Storm explained. They're helping to organize it. Their bioelectric fields are creating nodes of stability within the storm system. As if to demonstrate her point, 2-year-old Michael Chon toddled over to one of Webb's monitoring stations and placed his small hands on the sensor array. Immediately, the chaotic readings organized themselves into clear, interpretable patterns. Dr. Vasquez, who had been running medical scans on the children, looked up from her instruments. Storm, you need to see this. The children's brain activity has increased by 300% since the storm arrived. They're not just connected to the weather, they're actively processing atmospheric data and generating response patterns. Response patterns to what? To the planet itself. Their neural activity is syncing with geothermal fluctuations, magnetic field variations, even tidal forces from the dual moons. It's like they're becoming part of the planet's sensory system. The first major wind gust hit the plaza, but instead of the destructive force everyone expected, it was warm and gentle, carrying the scent of ozone and something that smelled like cinnamon. The children laughed and reached their arms up toward the wind, which seemed to swirl around them in playful spirals. Inspector Starweaver was frantically adjusting his instruments. This is impossible. Our readings show Category 5 storm conditions, but the actual wind speed here is barely 20 kilometers per hour. Because you're measuring the storm, Storm said, and we're inside the eye. But it's not a normal eye, it's a bioatmospheric eye, created and maintained by the symbiotic relationship between the children and the planet's weather systems. She moved to the center of the plaza, where the children had naturally gathered. They were holding hands now, forming a loose circle, their eyes glowing with the same bioluminescence that had appeared in the rain the night before. Listen, she said to the adults. Do you hear that? Everyone stopped talking and listened. Beneath the sound of wind and the distant rumble of thunder, there was something else, a deep, harmonic vibration that seemed to come from the ground itself. The planet is singing, Storm said softly, and the children are singing back. The phenomenon was unlike anything in galactic scientific records. The planet-born children had developed a form of bioacoustic communication with Kepler 442c, atmospheric and geological systems. They could sense changes in air pressure, electromagnetic fields, and even seismic activity, and then generate neural responses that helped stabilize those systems. It's not weather control, Storm explained to the growing crowd of observers. It's weather partnership. The planet generates the energy, and the children help direct it into stable patterns. As the storm reached its full intensity overhead, the contrast became even more dramatic. Through the sensor feeds from the colony's monitoring stations, they could see winds of incredible violence tearing across the landscape. Trees were being uprooted, rivers were changing course, and electromagnetic interference was shutting down equipment across 3 continents. But in the plaza, protected by the bioatmospheric eye created by the children, conditions remained calm and comfortable. The kids played in puddles of glowing rainwater, while their parents watched in amazement, and the Zeltharian visitors recalibrated their instruments for the 7th time. This changes everything, Counselor Silverwind said, her translator finally functioning properly in the stable electromagnetic environment. If humans can achieve atmospheric symbiosis with death worlds ... then we can live anywhere. Storm finished. Worlds that other species consider uninhabitable become viable colony sites. The galactic frontier gets a lot bigger, but even as she said it, Storm was monitoring her deep atmosphere sensors and seeing something that worried her. The protective eye around the plaza was stable, but it was requiring more and more energy to maintain as the storm grew stronger. The children were showing signs of fatigue, not physical tiredness, but a kind of neural exhaustion from processing so much atmospheric data. How long can they keep this up? Dr. Vasquez asked, checking her medical readings. I don't know, Storm admitted. This is uncharted territory, but I think we're about to find out. The storm's peak intensity was still 6 hours away, by hour. 4 of the storm, the children were beginning to show signs of strain. Their bioluminescent skin patterns were flickering irregularly, and several of the youngest ones had fallen asleep, despite the continuing atmospheric chaos around them. Dr. Vasquez moved between them with her medical scanner, monitoring vital signs and neural activity. Their brain activity is still elevated, but the patterns are becoming less organized, she reported to Storm. It's like they're overloading on sensory input. Storm watched little Lucia Martinez, who had been one of the most responsive children. During the initial observations, the 18-month-old was sitting quietly in her mother's lap now, staring up at the swirling clouds with unfocused eyes. Her skin still glowed faintly, but the patterns were chaotic rather than the organized waves they'd seen earlier. The bioatmospheric eye is destabilizing, Storm announced, checking her instruments. The protected zone around the plaza was shrinking, and she could feel the pressure changes as the storm's full force began to encroach on their safe space. Inspector Starweaver consulted his communication device. The evacuation fleet has reached the outer system. They report severe interference from the storm, but they could attempt an emergency extraction if conditions deteriorate further. No, Storm said firmly. If we break the symbiotic connection now, while the children are this deeply integrated with the atmospheric system, it could cause permanent neurological damage, and the planet's weather system would destabilize completely. She moved to the center of the plaza, where the children were gathered, the older ones, the 2-year-olds who had been born just after the colony's establishment, were trying to maintain the connection, their small faces showing concentration that should have been impossible at their age. What can we do to help them? Asked Sarah Martinez. Holding her daughter close, Storm studied her readings, looking for any pattern that might suggest a solution. The children's neural activity was synchronized with the storm system, but the synchronization was becoming more chaotic as the storm reached peak intensity. They needed some way to reduce the sensory load without breaking the connection entirely. The adults, Storm said suddenly. The children are trying to process all the atmospheric data themselves, but they don't have to. We can help distribute the load. How? Director Chon asked. Biofeedback training. If the adults can learn to partially sync with the children's neural patterns, we can create a distributed processing network. Instead of 87 children trying to manage a planetary weather system, we have 300 humans working together. Dr. Vasquez looked skeptical. Storm, that's not how neural synchronization works. Adult brains don't have the plasticity to adapt to new bioelectric patterns in real time. Normal adult brains don't, Storm agreed. But we've all been living on this planet for 2 years. We've all been exposed to the same atmospheric conditions that shaped these children's development. Maybe we've adapted more than we realize. She activated her bioatmospheric scanner and turned it toward the gathered adults. The readings showed faint but detectable neural responses to the electromagnetic fluctuations around them. The adults weren't as sensitive as the children, but they were responding to the planetary systems. Everyone, I need you to hold hands, Storm announced. Form a circle around the children. We're going to try something that's either brilliant or completely insane. The colonists looked at each other uncertainly, but they began to form the requested circle. Parents, engineers, doctors, teachers, and maintenance workers, all linked. Hands around the planet-born children, creating a human chain that encompassed most of the plaza. Now, close your eyes and try to feel what the children are feeling, Storm instructed. Don't think about it analytically. Just let your nervous system respond to whatever it's picking up from the atmosphere. The effect was subtle at first. A few adults reported tingling sensations in their hands and feet. Others mentioned feeling slightly dizzy or experiencing mild synesthesia, seeing colors when they heard sounds, or tasting metal when the wind changed direction. But as the human chain stabilized, something remarkable began to happen. The children's neural patterns became more organized as the adults began to share the sensory load. The bioatmospheric eye around the plaza expanded and strengthened, pushing back against the storm's encroachment. "It's working," Dr. Vasquez said in amazement, watching her medical readings. The children's stress levels are dropping as the adults integrate into the network. Storm monitored the process through her instruments, watching as 300 human nervous systems began to synchronize with Kepler 442c's atmospheric patterns. It wasn't full integration. The adults lacked the children's innate sensitivity, but it was enough to create a stable biofeedback loop. "We're not just surviving the storm," Storm realized. "We're becoming part of it." Counselor Silverwind was recording everything with her suit's sensors. This level of species-wide adaptation is unprecedented in galactic records. If this phenomenon can be replicated on other death worlds, it can't be replicated, Storm interrupted. It can only be grown. Each world would require its own unique symbiotic relationship, developed over years of mutual adaptation between human colonists and local conditions. The storm continued for another 4 hours, but the combined human atmospheric network held steady. Adults took turns maintaining the biofeedback connection, allowing others to rest while ensuring the children never had to bear the full sensory load alone. By the time the storm began to subside, the entire colony had participated in the atmospheric partnership. As the winds finally calmed and the electromagnetic interference faded, the results became clear. The storm hadn't destroyed anything, it had reorganized everything. Rivers now flowed in patterns that better supported the colony's irrigation needs. The electromagnetic fields had stabilized in configurations that actually improved communication and power distribution. Even the soil composition had changed, becoming more fertile and better suited to Earth-adapted crops. The planet remodeled itself, Marcus Webb said in wonder, checking his engineering readings. The storm wasn't trying to destroy the colony, it was trying to optimize it. Inspector Starweaver was busy documenting everything for his report to the Galactic Council. The implications of this discovery are staggering. If humans can achieve this level of environmental integration on death worlds, it will revolutionize galactic colonization patterns. But Storm was focused on something else. The children, exhausted by their role in the atmospheric partnership, were finally sleeping peacefully. But their bioluminescent patterns were still active, pulsing gently in rhythm with the planet's now calm electromagnetic fields. "They're not going back to normal," Dr. Vasquez observed. "The neural integration is permanent. These children will always be connected to this world's atmospheric systems, which means they can never leave," Director Chun said quietly. Storm nodded. "This is their home now in a way that goes beyond anything humans have ever experienced. They're not just inhabitants of Kepler 442c, they're part of it." She looked around the plaza at the sleeping children and their exhausted parents. The colonists had proven that humans could not only survive on a death world, but could achieve true symbiosis with hostile environments. But that success came with a price. These children would forever be bound to this world, their nervous systems too integrated with the planetary systems to ever adapt to life elsewhere. "The evacuation fleet is requesting updated instructions," Starweaver reported. "What should I tell them?" Storm considered the question carefully. The storm had passed, the colony was safe, and they had proven that human atmospheric symbiosis was possible. But the children born here represented something unprecedented in galactic history, a generation of humans who are no longer fully human in the traditional sense. "Tell them we're staying," she said finally. "All of us. This is where we belong." Now, 3 weeks after the storm, Storm stood in her rebuilt weather station, watching the morning readings scroll across her displays. The data was unlike anything she'd seen before the atmospheric event, completely stable, perfectly predictable, and somehow beautiful in its mathematical precision. The storm had fundamentally changed Kepler 442c's weather patterns. What had once been chaotic and dangerous was now organized and cooperative. The planet's atmospheric systems responded to human needs with an almost conscious intelligence, providing rain when crops needed water, generating favorable winds for transportation, and maintaining comfortable temperatures in populated areas. But the most remarkable changes were in the children. Storm watched through her station's windows as the planet-born kids played in the redesigned plaza below. Their bioluminescent patterns had stabilized into unique signatures, each child displaying distinctive light patterns that corresponded to their individual atmospheric sensitivities. Some were particularly sensitive to pressure changes, others to electromagnetic fluctuations, and a few seemed to respond to gravitational variations from the dual moons. Little Michael Chun had become the colony's unofficial weather boy. At just 2 years old, he could predict atmospheric changes hours before any mechanical instrument detected them. When asked how he knew rain was coming, he would simply point to his glowing skin patterns and say, "Tingly." Dr. Vasquez had established a new research division dedicated to studying the bioatmospheric integration. Her preliminary findings suggested that the children's neural modifications were hereditary. Babies born after the storm showed even stronger atmospheric connections than their older siblings. "We're not just witnessing adaptation," she explained to Storm during one of their regular briefings. "We're witnessing the emergence of a new human subspecies, Homo atmosphерicus, if you will." The implications were staggering. If the children's abilities were hereditary, then Kepler 442c wasn't just humanity's first successful Death World colony. Was the birthplace of a new branch of human evolution, specifically adapted for extreme atmospheric conditions. Director Chun had been fielding communications from Earth and the core worlds for weeks. Every major university, research institution, and colonial authority wanted to study the Kepler effect, but they all wanted to study it from a safe distance, bringing the children to controlled laboratory environments. "They don't understand," Chun told Storm during one of their planning meetings. "They think we can package this discovery and replicate it somewhere else. They don't realize that what happened here is unique to this specific relationship between these humans and this world." The Galactic Council's response had been more nuanced. Counselor Silverwind had remained on planet to serve as a permanent observer, her initial skepticism replaced by fascination with the bioatmospheric partnership. Her reports had convinced the Council to classify Kepler 442c as a symbiotic colony, a new category of settlement that acknowledged the unique relationship between the inhabitants and their environment. The Council is prepared to offer significant resources for continued research, Silverwind informed Storm during one of their regular consultations. But they require assurance that the symbiotic relationship is stable and won't pose a threat to galactic biosecurity. Threat? Storm raised an eyebrow. These children can predict weather patterns. They're not weapons. Any unprecedented biological adaptation is considered a potential security concern until proven otherwise, Silverwind explained. The Council has seen too many promising discoveries turn into galactic disasters. Storm understood the concern, but she also knew that treating the children as research subjects or security risks would undermine everything they'd achieved. The bioatmospheric partnership worked because it was based on trust and natural development. Turn it into a controlled experiment, and it would likely collapse. The real test came 6 months later, when a second storm system approached the planet. This one was different from the first. Seasonal atmospheric disturbance that occurred every few years due to orbital mechanics around the dual suns. Pre-storm Kepler 442c, such systems had been manageable but dangerous, requiring careful preparation and occasional evacuations from exposed areas. But as the new storm approached, Storm noticed something unprecedented in her readings. The children weren't just predicting the storm's arrival, they were actively preparing for it. Their bioluminescent patterns had shifted to new configurations. Their neural activity showed anticipatory spikes, and they were all displaying behavior patterns that seemed designed to optimize the colony's atmospheric defenses. "They're not just reading the weather anymore," Storm reported to the colony leadership. "They're planning for it." The storm arrived exactly when the children predicted it would. following exactly the path they had indicated through their behavioral patterns. But instead of the violent atmospheric chaos that orbital sensors detected, the colony experienced what could only be described as atmospheric maintenance. The storm's winds cleaned dust and debris from solar collectors and communication arrays. Its electromagnetic fields recharged power storage systems. Its precipitation watered crops and refilled reservoirs with precisely the amounts needed for optimal agricultural production. The children didn't just predict the storm, Dr. Vasquez realized. They negotiated with it. The implications were profound. The planet-born children weren't just adapted to Kepler 442c's weather systems. They had developed the ability to actively communicate with and influence those systems. They were becoming partners in planetary management, helping to optimize atmospheric conditions for the benefit of all. Inhabitants. News of the atmospheric negotiation event spread throughout galactic scientific communities within days. Research teams from dozens of species requested permission to study the phenomenon. Colonial authorities began planning new Deathworld settlement projects based on the Kepler model, and xenobiologists started developing theories about directed evolution and environmental consciousness. But Storm remained focused on the immediate implications for the colony itself. The children's abilities were growing stronger with each passing month. They were beginning to influence not just weather patterns, but geological activity, electromagnetic fields, and even gravitational variations caused by the dual moons. Watching the birth of a planetary consciousness, she told Counselor Silverwind during one of their discussions. The children aren't just communicating with Kepler 442c's systems. They're becoming part of those systems, and the planet is becoming part of them. Is that ... concerning? Silverwind asked. Storm considered the question carefully. The children showed no signs of losing their human personalities or cognitive abilities. They were still kids who liked to play games, learn new things, and spend time with their families. But they were also becoming something more: environmental stewards with capabilities that no human had ever possessed. It's concerning in the same way that any major evolutionary leap is concerning, Storm said finally. We don't know where it leads, but we know that trying to stop it or control it would be both impossible and wrong. 2 years after the first storm, Storm received a message that changed everything. The communication came through official Galactic Council channels, marked with the highest priority designations. The message was from Earth. Dr. Jenkins, the holographic projection of Dr. Amanda Torres, director of Earth's Colonial Development Authority, appeared in Storm's weather station. We've been monitoring the developments on Kepler 442c with great interest. The Galactic Council has shared their findings regarding the bioatmospheric integration phenomenon, and we believe it represents humanity's greatest evolutionary opportunity since the development of interstellar travel. Storm felt a familiar chill of apprehension. She'd been expecting this call for months. The Colonial Authority is prepared to offer unprecedented resources for the expansion of the Kepler project. Dr. Torres continued, we want to establish similar colonies on 12 other death worlds throughout human space. But first, we need to understand the exact mechanisms of atmospheric integration. We're sending a research fleet with the most advanced xenobiological laboratories ever constructed. They'll need to conduct comprehensive studies of the planet-born children to determine how their adaptations can be replicated elsewhere. The message ended with coordinates for the research fleet's arrival and a list of specimen collection requirements that made Storm's blood run cold. The Earth authorities weren't planning to study the children's integration with their environment. They were planning to study the children themselves as biological specimens to be analyzed, cataloged, and potentially replicated. Storm immediately called an emergency meeting of the colony leadership. Director Chun, Dr. Vasquez, Captain Sullivan, and the heads of all major departments gathered in the council chamber, along with Counselor Silverwind, who had become an unofficial advocate for the colony's interests. They want to take the children, Storm announced without preamble. Earth's Colonial Authority is planning to establish a research program that would remove the planet-born kids from Kepler 442c for study. The room erupted in angry voices. Parents who had been invited to the meeting began shouting questions and demands. Dr. Vasquez stood up, her face pale with fury. "Over my dead body," she said. "Those children can't survive separation from this planet's atmospheric systems. Their neural integration is too complete. Removing them would be murder." "The research teams won't see it that way," Sean replied grimly. "They'll assume that human adaptability means that children can readjust to any environment with proper medical support." Storm activated her bioatmospheric scanner and projected the current readings onto the council chamber's main display. Data showed the children's neural patterns integrated with dozens of different planetary systems' atmospheric pressure, electromagnetic fields, gravitational variations, seismic activity, and even the quantum fluctuations generated by the dual suns. "This isn't just atmospheric adaptation," Storm explained. "The children are neurologically bonded to this entire world. They're not just humans living on Kepler 442. They're part of Kepler 442c. Separate them from the planet, and you might as well rip out their nervous systems." Counselor Silver Wind, who had been quietly monitoring her own instruments, spoke up. "The research fleet is already in hyperspace. They'll arrive in 18 standard days. The Galactic Council has approved the research program under the Special Scientific Investigation Protocol." "What does that mean?" Captain Sullivan asked. "It means the researchers have broad authority to collect whatever samples and data they deem necessary for galactic security," Silver Wind replied, "including biological specimens." Storm felt the weight of responsibility settling on her shoulders. She had been the one to encourage the colony to stay during the first storm, to prove that humans could achieve atmospheric symbiosis with death worlds. Now that success threatened to destroy the very children who had made it possible. "We have 18 days to figure out how to protect 87 children from the most powerful research authority in human space," she said. "Ideas?" The discussion that followed was intense and sometimes heated. Some colonists suggested hiding the children, others proposed appealing to higher authorities, and a few even suggested armed resistance against the research fleet. But it was little Michael Chun who provided the answer. The 3-year-old had been playing quietly in the corner of the council chamber while the adults argued. Suddenly, he walked to the center of the room and placed his small hands on Storm's bioatmospheric scanner. Immediately, the device began displaying readings that none of them had seen before. "Michael, what are you doing?" Director Chun asked. The child looked up at the adults with his glowing eyes and said, "Talking to the sky friends." The scanner's display showed massive electromagnetic disturbances forming in the outer atmosphere, not natural weather patterns, but organized energy constructs that corresponded to the neural activities of every planet-born child in the colony. "They're creating a planetary defense system," Dr. Vasquez breathed. "The children are using their atmospheric integration to generate a protective field around the entire world." Storm studied the readings with growing amazement. The energy patterns were unlike anything in meteorological records, a hybrid of natural atmospheric phenomena and directed biological activity that created a barrier capable of disrupting any technology that entered the planet's magnetosphere without permission. "They're not just protecting themselves," Storm realized. "They're protecting the planet's right to choose its own evolutionary path." When the research fleet arrived 18 days later, they found Kepler 442c surrounded by what their instruments could only classify as impossible weather. Electromagnetic storms that shouldn't exist, gravitational anomalies that defied physics, and atmospheric conditions that seemed to actively resist technological intrusion. The fleet's commanding officer, Admiral Sarah Cross, sent multiple communications demanding safe passage to the planet's surface. Each message was answered by Storm, speaking on behalf of the colony leadership. "Admiral, Kepler 442c is a sovereign colony operating under Galactic Council's symbiotic settlement protocols," Storm transmitted. "The atmospheric conditions you're encountering are a natural defense system generated by the planet's integrated biosystems. Any attempt to force entry will be considered an act of aggression against both the human colony and the planetary ecosystem. Dr. Jenkins, we have legal authority to conduct scientific research under the Special Investigation Protocol. Admiral Cross replied, "These atmospheric disturbances are clearly artificial. We demand that they be deactivated immediately." "I'm afraid that's not possible, Admiral. The atmospheric defense system is controlled by the planetary consciousness, not by human technology, and the planetary consciousness has decided that it doesn't want to be studied." The standoff continued for 3 days. The research fleet remained in orbit, unable to penetrate the planet's defenses, while the colonists maintained their position that the children's integration with Kepler 442c gave the planet the right to refuse unwanted visitors. The resolution came from an unexpected source, the Galactic Council, responding to Counselor Silverwind's detailed reports on the situation. Issued an unprecedented ruling, they declared Kepler 442c to be the galaxy's first conscious world, a planet whose integrated biological systems demonstrated sufficient complexity and autonomy to be considered a sentient entity with rights under galactic law. The Council recognizes that the atmospheric integration achieved between human colonists and the planetary systems of Kepler 442c represents a new form of consciousness that transcends individual species boundaries, the official statement read. As such, this consciousness has the right to determine its own interactions with external entities, including research activities. The research fleet was ordered to withdraw. Earth's colonial authority was prohibited from conducting involuntary studies of the planet-born children, and Kepler 442c became the first world in galactic history to be granted legal standing as a living entity. But the most remarkable development came in the weeks that followed. Other Death World colonies throughout human space began recording similar phenomena. Children born on hostile worlds were showing signs of environmental integration. Atmospheric patterns were becoming more stable and cooperative, and planetary defense systems were emerging wherever humans had achieved true symbiosis with their adopted worlds. "It's spreading," Storm told Counselor Silverwind as they watched the latest reports from the galactic data networks. "The bioatmospheric integration isn't limited to Kepler 442c. It's a fundamental human adaptation to extreme environments, which means the galaxy is about to become a very different place," Silverwind replied. "Conscious worlds, atmospheric partnerships, planetary rights. These concepts will challenge every assumption about colonization and species interaction." Storm nodded, watching through her weather station's windows as the children played in the plaza below. Their bioluminescent patterns were more complex, now displaying information exchanges with the planet that resembled a constant conversation between old friends. The children aren't just the future of humanity, she realized. They're the future of consciousness itself, and they're teaching us that intelligence isn't something you impose on the universe, it's something you partner with. As if responding to her words, the planet's electromagnetic field pulsed gently, carrying a harmonic resonance that sounded almost like laughter. The children looked up from their games and waved at the sky, their glowing patterns flickering in what could only be described as joy. Storm smiled and waved back, not at the children, but at the sky itself. After all, she was talking to a friend. 5 years after the first storm, Storm Jenkins stood before the Galactic Council Assembly, addressing representatives from 200 different species about the phenomenon that had transformed human space. The Atmospheric Partnership Program has now been successful on 37 different death worlds, she reported, her words being translated into dozens of languages simultaneously. Each world has developed its own unique form of bioenvironmental integration, but all share common characteristics: enhanced human adaptation, planetary consciousness emergence, and cooperative atmospheric management. The assembly chamber was filled with beings from across the galaxy, all eager to understand how humans had achieved something previously thought impossible: true symbiosis with hostile environments. Some species saw it as humanity's greatest achievement. Others viewed it as a dangerous precedent that challenged traditional concepts of planetary colonization. The children born on these worlds represent a new phase of human evolution, Storm continued. They are not superhuman, but they are differently human. Their neural systems have adapted to process environmental data in ways that allow for direct communication with planetary systems. They are, quite literally, the children of their worlds. Counselor Silverwind now serving as the Assembly's primary expert on atmospheric integration, had provided comprehensive documentation of the phenomenon. Her research showed that the planet-born children were not only surviving on death worlds, they were thriving in ways that benefited entire ecosystems. The implications extend far beyond human colonization, Silverwind added to Storm's presentation. These conscious worlds are beginning to communicate with each other, sharing atmospheric management techniques and environmental optimization strategies. We are witnessing the emergence of a galactic network of planetary intelligence. The questions that followed were predictable but important. Could other species achieve similar integration? Were the conscious worlds a threat to non-integrated planets? How would galactic law adapt to the reality of worlds with legal rights? Storm answered each question with the patience of someone who had spent years defending her colony's right to exist. But the most important question came from an unexpected source, a young Zeltharian scientist whose research had been inspired by the Kepler 442c discoveries. Dr. Jenkins, what advice would you give to species considering their own atmospheric integration programs? Storm smiled, thinking of little Michael Chun, now 8 years old and serving as Kepler 442c's primary atmospheric coordinator. The boy could predict weather patterns months in advance and could actively influence storm systems to optimize growing conditions for the colony's expanding agricultural programs. Don't try to replicate what we did, she said. Every world is different. Every species is different. And every relationship between inhabitants and environment will be unique. The key isn't to control your planet, it's to become partners with it. Listen to what your world is trying to tell you and be prepared to change in ways you never expected. After the assembly, Storm returned to Kepler 442c to find the colony celebrating the 10th anniversary of her arrival. The settlement had grown to over 50,000 inhabitants, including families from dozens of different human worlds, who came specifically to have their children born in the planet's integrated atmosphere. The children, now ranging from newborns to teenagers, had organized the celebration themselves, using their atmospheric communication abilities to coordinate weather patterns. They created the most spectacular light show in the planet's recorded history. Aurora-like displays danced across the sky in rhythm with music generated by controlled electromagnetic pulses. They're not just living on this world anymore, Dr. Vasquez observed. Watching the atmospheric light show, they're conducting it like a symphony. Storm nodded, checking her weather instruments one last time before joining the celebration. The readings showed perfect atmospheric stability, optimized growing conditions, and energy patterns that suggested the planet itself was happy. She had come to Kepler 442c as a meteorologist, thinking her job was to predict the weather. Instead, she had helped birth a new form of consciousness that made weather prediction obsolete. The planet-born children didn't predict storms, they participated in them, helping to guide atmospheric forces toward outcomes that benefited all inhabitants. As the celebration continued into the night, Storm found herself standing in the same plaza where she had first demonstrated the children's atmospheric integration. The bioatmospheric sensors were still there, now serving as monuments to humanity's first successful partnership with a conscious world. Gentle hand tugged at her sleeve. She looked down to see Lucia Martinez, now 6 years old and glowing, with the complex light patterns that marked her as one of the planet's primary atmospheric communicators. Miss Storm, Lucia said, the sky wants to thank you. Storm looked up at the aurora display, where the light seemed to pulse in acknowledgement. Tell the sky I said it was my pleasure, and ask if there's anything else it needs. Lucia closed her eyes for a moment, her light patterns shifting as she communicated with the planetary consciousness. When she opened them again, she was smiling. The sky says it's thinking about making some new friends. There are lonely planets out there that need children to talk to them. Storm grinned, understanding the implication. Kepler 442c wasn't content to be the only conscious world in the galaxy. It was planning to help other planets achieve their own integration with human colonists, spreading the partnership model throughout human space and beyond. Well then, Storm said, I guess we better start training more weather readers. The aurora display pulsed brighter, and across the galaxy, On 37 other conscious worlds, children looked up at their own skies and saw lights dancing in patterns that spelled hope in languages that hadn't existed. Before humans learned to listen to the songs of worlds, Storm, Jenkins had come to Kepler 442c to read the weather. Instead, she had helped teach the universe to sing.